Good evening, fellow listener. Tonight, we're visiting a place where saying no to the wrong person could get you hanged, where neighbors became executioners, and where the phrase, innocent until proven guilty, hadn't been invented yet, mostly because nobody thought they'd need it. You've made it through another day in a world where accusations stick and denials don't, where someone's word against you can end everything you've built. We're going back to Salem, Massachusetts, where winter never seemed to end, where every word was weighed for signs of wickedness, and where one servant girl's refusal to be quiet would teach America its first lesson about what happens when fear becomes law. Now settle in and prepare to spend a day in 1692, where the air itself seemed designed to suffocate anyone who dared to breathe freely. Picture this. You open your eyes. It's March 1692, and the knock you've been dreading has finally come. The pounding on the door cuts through pre-dawn darkness like an axe through ice. You know that sound. Urgent, official, carrying authority that doesn't ask permission. Your name is Sarah Bishop. You're 17, and as of yesterday afternoon, you are officially a witch. You sit up in your narrow servant's bed, beneath the Putnam house's slanted roof, chest already tight with knowledge that your world ended when little Ann Putnam pointed her finger and screamed. The air feels thick, pressing down like a heavy quilt wrapped too tightly around your throat. Through thin walls, you hear Thomas Putnam's boots crossing wooden floors. His voice, usually commanding in that particular way of men who owned both land and people, sounds different now, excited, breathless with righteous authority. Constable Herrick, he says, satisfaction seeping through floorboards like winter cold. She's upstairs. The girl who corrupted my daughter with her devil's touch. Your hands shake, pulling a rough woolen dress over your shift. The fabric feels heavier than it should, soaked with condemnation. Every movement compresses the air around you, making each breath conscious effort. The stays of your bodice, laced tight according to Puritan propriety, squeeze your ribs until you can barely expand your lungs. The door opens without ceremony. Constable George Herrick fills the frame, bulk blocking pale morning light. Behind him, Thomas Putnam hovers like a spider feeling something valuable struggling into his web. Sarah Bishop, Herrick announces, as if your name were an indictment. By warrant of their Majesties' justices, you are commanded to appear before magistrates to answer charges of sundry acts of witchcraft committed upon the bodies of Ann Putnam and Mercy Lewis. The words hit like stones. Each syllable lands with physical weight, pressing down on shoulders, chest, ability to think clearly. This is when legal language becomes suffocation. Formal phrases wrapping around your throat like a noose made of parchment and procedure. You want to explain about that night 6 weeks ago when Master Putnam cornered you in the root cellar. His hands whispered promises and threats, your desperate push sending him stumbling backward into preserves. How his daughter Anne watched from cellar stairs, 11-year-old eyes wide with something that might have been understanding or calculation. But your throat has closed. The air feels solid, unbreathable. The stays around your ribs might as well be iron. I haven't, you begin. But Putnam cuts you off with a gesture both dismissive and threatening. Save your lies for magistrates, girl. My daughter bears marks of your devil's touch. The evidence of your wickedness is written on their suffering bodies. Something cold settles in your stomach as the full implications hit you. In Salem, the victim's word isn't just believed. It's treated as scientific fact. If Ann Putnam says you sent your spirit to pinch her at night, the bruises on her arms become legal evidence, as concrete as a bloody knife. If Mercy Lewis claims your ghostly form choked her while she slept, her difficulty breathing becomes proof of your supernatural assault. The genius of spectral evidence is its complete unfalsifiability. How do you prove you weren't somewhere in spirit form? How do you establish an alibi for your soul? The constable binds your hands with methodical efficiency. The rope isn't tight enough to cut circulation, but tight enough to remind you with every movement that you are no longer a person with agency. You are cargo being transported. The morning air should feel refreshing, but instead presses against your face like damp cloth. Salem village in March is a study in suffocation. Bare trees reaching toward grey sky like grasping fingers. Houses huddled close as if trying to breathe each other's air. The path from Putnam House to Ingersoll's Tavern might as well be a gauntlet. Every step brings you past neighbours who've known you for 3 years, who've accepted your help in kitchens, who've nodded politely when you carried messages or delivered preserves. Now they stare with expressions you've never seen. Not hatred exactly, but something worse. Fear mixed with fascination. The look of people watching a dangerous animal led to its cage. They press closer but not too close, as if whatever evil infected you might be contagious. Ingersoll's Tavern has been transformed into something between a courtroom and an amphitheatre of horror. Tables and benches rearranged to create formal space where justice, or what passes for justice in Salem, can perform its deadly ritual. The air inside hits you like a wall. Dozens of bodies packed into space meant for half that number. Breath and sweat and acrid fear creating atmosphere thick enough to chew. Every exhalation seems to reduce available oxygen for everyone else. Magistrates John Hathorne and Jonathan Corwin sit behind a table, serving as both bench and barrier. Hathorne's face could have been carved from the same unforgiving granite marking Salem's graves. His questions come like hammers striking metal, each designed to shape your responses into the confession he's already decided you'll make. Sarah Bishop, he begins. And even your name sounds different, sharper, more dangerous. Look upon Ann Putnam and tell this court, why do you hurt her? The question is a masterpiece of legal suffocation. Not, did you hurt her, but why do you hurt her? Assumption of guilt built into grammar itself. Your innocence isn't a possibility to explore. It's an obstacle to overcome. Ann Putnam sits in the front row, 11 years old and already master of theatre that would make professional actors envious. As your eyes meet hers, she begins her performance. Body contorting in ways seeming to defy anatomy, screams sounding torn from her throat by invisible claws. She sticks pins in me, Anne shrieks, pointing with finger trembling with perfect dramatic timing. Her spectre comes to me at night and presses upon my chest until I cannot breathe. The courtroom holds its breath as you stand before Hathorne. Every eye trained on your face for signs of guilt or innocence. You decide to show respect for the court's authority. Surely composure and deference will demonstrate your good character. The moment you stand quietly, Hathorne's face hardens with something approaching satisfaction. See how calmly she stands, while her victims writhe in agony, he announces to the crowd. Only the devil's own could maintain such unnatural peace in the face of such suffering. Your heart lurches. When you protest your innocence, your carefully chosen words somehow become proof of demonic influence. Notice how smoothly she lies, how readily the falsehoods fall from her tongue. This is not natural deception. This is the father of lies speaking through her. The trap reveals itself with sickening clarity. The more innocently you behave, the more guilty you appear. When you look at your accusers to plead your case directly, they immediately fall into fits that send them writhing on the floor. When you look away to spare them further torment, Hathorn demands to know why you refuse to face those you've tortured. You're trapped in a logical maze where every path leads to the same destination. The game is rigged not just against innocence, but against the very concept of innocence itself. Mercy Lewis, the Putnam's other servant and your former friend, takes her turn as star witness. She's older than Anne, nearly your age, and her performance more sophisticated. Less theatrical convulsions, more devastating personal testimony. She came to me at night, Mercy says, voice carrying just the right tremor of remembered terror. Her shape pressed down upon me until I could not draw breath. She whispered promises of power if I would sign the devil's book. She rolls up sleeves revealing fresh scratches that could have come from any cats prowling Salem village's barns. But in this suffocating atmosphere of fear and suspicion, they become evidence of supernatural assault, as concrete as fingerprints. If you find what we do oddly soothing or mildly disturbing in an intellectually rewarding way, consider liking the video and subscribing. It helps us keep making strange, quiet videos about things no one asked for, like how quickly your community can decide you're evil. And if you're still conscious enough to type, leave us a comment. Tell us where you're listening from and what time it is. Bonus points if you've never been accused of consorting with the devil. But what if you could step outside your suffocating terror for a moment? What if you could see this scene through different eyes? You wake in the master's bed of your prosperous farmhouse, and for the first time in weeks, the tight band of anxiety wrapped around your chest loosens. Through your window, you can see the constable's cart carrying that bishop girl toward her judgment, and satisfaction fills your lungs like clean air. Thomas Putnam, that's who you are this morning. 40 years old, one of Salem village's most prosperous farmers, a man whose word carries weight. Your breathing is deep and regular, the satisfied rhythm of someone watching a carefully laid plan unfold exactly as designed. The root cellar incident still haunts your sleep, but not with guilt, with the cold fear of exposure that could destroy everything you've built. When that bishop girl pushed you away 6 weeks ago, when she looked at you with those eyes full of disgust and determination, you knew she'd become dangerous. But more than that, she'd become a witness to your weakness, your willingness to use authority for personal gratification. When Anne began showing signs of the strange affliction sweeping through Salem village, the fits, the visions, the claims of spectral torment, you saw opportunity crystallizing like ice forming on winter glass. All it took was a few careful conversations during her frightened episodes. "Remember the girl who serves us," you whispered to Anne during one particular fit. "Remember how she looked at you that night in the cellar." Anne, 11 years old and desperate to please her father, seized on the explanation like a drowning person grasping a rope. Yes, she remembered. Yes, there had been something wrong. The beauty of the accusation is how perfectly it solves multiple problems simultaneously. It removes the bishop girl as a threat. It explains Anne's disturbing behavior in terms the community can understand. Most importantly, it positions your family as victims rather than participants in whatever shameful scene played out in your cellar. But across the crowded tavern, another set of eyes watches the proceedings with growing unease. What if you could feel the air through different lungs? Lungs that are slowly learning what it means when speaking truth becomes the most dangerous act possible. You stand near the tavern's small windows, trying to catch what little fresh air seeps through the gaps around the wooden frames. The morning started like any other, feeding the animals, checking fences, the honest work of a man who earns his bread through sweat rather than speculation. John Proctor, That's who you've been for 39 years. One of Salem's most respected farmers, known for plain speaking and practical wisdom. But watching this young servant girl trapped in legal quicksand, something constricts around your throat like an invisible noose. You were among the first to express skepticism about these witchcraft accusations. If it were not for the poverty and malice of the accusers, you said publicly just last week, I should suspect they are all lying. Those words came easily when the accused were convenient targets. Sarah Good the beggar, Sarah Osborne the invalid, Tituba the foreign slave. But watching Sarah Bishop stand before magistrates who've already decided her fate, you begin to understand something that makes your chest tight with recognition. No one is safe. If they can destroy a young servant girl based on the fantasies of children and the malice of masters, they can destroy anyone. The suffocating atmosphere in this tavern isn't just the press of too many bodies. It's the feeling of a community learning to breathe poison and call it purification. Your farmer's eyes notice things others miss. How Thomas Putnam's face shows satisfaction rather than sorrow as he watches the girl suffer. How the afflicted girls seem to time their fits for maximum dramatic effect. Their performances growing more elaborate with each appreciative gasp from the crowd. How the magistrates ask leading questions designed to produce confessions rather than discover truth. Most disturbing of all is how the crowd responds, not with horror at these accusations, but with excitement at the entertainment. They lean forward hungrily during the girls' performances, gasp with appreciation at particularly creative torments, nod with approval when Hathorn springs verbal traps that leave the accused stammering and confused. This is what happens when fear becomes spectacle, when justice transforms into theatre, when a community discovers that destroying the innocent can be more satisfying than protecting them. Your breathing grows shallow as you watch Sarah's face, young, terrified, but still holding on to some desperate hope that truth might matter more than performance. In her eyes, you see the death of something precious, the belief that speaking honestly might be enough to save your life. The decision forms in your chest before it reaches your mind. You cannot stay silent. You will not let this suffocating madness consume Salem without at least one voice raised in opposition, even if that voice can barely find air enough to speak. This is madness, you say, clearly enough for everyone to hear. We are destroying innocent people based on the fantasies of children and the spite of neighbors. The effect is immediate and electric. Conversations stop, bodies turn. The oppressive air somehow becomes even thicker, charged with the kind of dangerous energy that precedes lightning strikes. Hathorn's eyes fix on you with the focused intensity of a predator identifying new prey. Anne Putnam begins to writhe in her seat, her voice cutting through the suddenly silent tavern. John Proctor, his spectre comes to me. He bids me to sign the devil's book. The words hit you like a physical blow. The machinery of accusation has turned on you, one of the community's most respected members, simply because you dared to question his logic. 3 weeks have passed since you watched John Proctor speak truth in Ingersoll's tavern, since you saw the machinery of accusation turn on him the moment he dared to question Salem's madness. Now you, Sarah, sit in Salem jail, sharing a cramped cell with 5 other accused witches. The cell is smaller than Putnam's root cellar. 6 women pressed together like grain in a storage bin, each breath drawing from supply that never seems adequate. You've learned to sleep sitting up, back against stone walls weeping moisture and cold. Mary Warren, John Proctor's servant, huddles in the corner farthest from the door. She was brought in 2 days after her master, accused by the same girls she once counted as friends. He tried to save me, she whispers in darkness, Master Proctor tried to tell them the girls were lying. Now look where it's brought us both. Rebecca Nurse, 71, and until recently one of Salem's most revered church members, lies on straw beside you. Her breathing is laboured. The wet rattle of age and cold and particular exhaustion that comes from having your life's reputation destroyed in an afternoon. But her presence brings something the cell desperately needs, steady rhythm of someone who has made peace with suffocation. They will hang us, she says matter-of-factly. We will not confess to lies, and they will not admit their error. We are caught between truth and madness has the stronger grip. But even in this stone box, designed to compress hope out of human bodies, something survives. When Sarah Good's baby cries at night, everyone shifts to give the mother more room, more air, more of whatever small comfort can be shared. This is what remains when everything else is taken. The stubborn human refusal to let suffocation win completely. The quiet insistence on sharing whatever air is left. The morning of July 19th arrives with unseasonable coolness, as if Earth itself wants to make breathing easier on this day when breathing will end for 5 women whose only crime was existing in the wrong place at the wrong time with wrong enemies. They come before dawn with mechanical efficiency of men who've developed routines. Your hands are bound with iron shackles speaking to the finality of the day ahead. The metal is cold against wrists, drawing heat from your body like a preview of coldness to come. The cart ride to Gallows Hill should be terrifying, but instead feels strangely peaceful. For the first time in months, you're breathing outdoor air, thin and sharp with morning frost, but clean, free of compressed fear filling every indoor space in Salem. Rebecca Nurse sits beside you, ancient hands steady despite shackles, breathing slow and even. She's found something that eluded you until this moment. Realization that they can control your body, your freedom, your length of days, but cannot control the truth of who you are or the manner in which you meet whatever comes next. I forgive them, she says quietly, words carried away by wind, no human authority can regulate. Not because they deserve forgiveness, but because carrying their poison in my heart would only make the suffocation complete. The crowd at Gallows Hill is smaller than expected, but larger than hoped. Some faces show genuine sorrow, neighbors who remember you kindly, church members who suspect they're witnessing murder dressed as justice. Others display satisfied excitement of people attending entertainment. Thomas Putnam stands near the front, chest rising and falling with the steady rhythm of a man watching problems solve themselves. Beside him, Anne looks pale and confused, as if beginning to understand the weight of words that tumbled so easily from her 11-year-old tongue. You've learned something in that suffocating cell, something about the difference between air that keeps your body alive and breath that keeps your soul intact. Some suffocation is chosen, and some kinds of breathing aren't worth the cost. Your last words are not dramatic or eloquent. They're simply true. I am innocent of these charges. I go to my death forgiving those who brought me here, and I pray Salem will learn to breathe freely again when this madness passes. The noose is rough hemp, coarse against throat skin, but in the moment before the cart pulls away, before breathing stops forever, you feel something unexpected, a loosening in your chest, release of pressure building since that first knock on Putnam's door. The truth you died defending will outlive the lies. Salem will learn, eventually, to breathe freely again, not because madness passes, but because people like Rebecca Nurse and John Proctor, and even you, Sarah Bishop, refuse to let fear suffocate everything decent in the human heart. But perhaps the most haunting question isn't how Salem's madness began, but how quickly it spread. How does a community of God-fearing people convince themselves that murdering their neighbors is righteous work? What makes ordinary citizens so eager to believe the worst about those they've lived beside for years? And when the machinery of accusation starts grinding, devouring the innocent and guilty alike, what does it take for someone to say enough, even when speaking the truth has become the most dangerous act possible? The machinery itself is timeless, only the direction changes. Those who once wielded accusations as weapons inevitably cry persecution when scrutiny turns their way. Power always finds ways to avoid accountability, whether by making accusations or by claiming to be the victim of them. The same men who once pointed fingers and watched others hang will later invoke witch hunts when their own behavior comes to light. Maybe the real horror of Salem isn't that it happened, but how familiar it feels. How easily we recognize the suffocating pressure of being forced to choose between saying what's expected and saying what's true. How readily we understand the terrible mathematics of survival that turn neighbors into executioners and children into weapons. Good night, fellow traveler. Rest well knowing that in history's darkest moments, some souls chose truth over breathing, integrity over survival, love over fear. Their final breaths became the first breath of hope for those who came after. Sweet dreams from a time when dying with dignity was the only way to live with honor, and when courage to speak truth became more precious than the air to speak it.